You're telling me this dog was in the military? Dear right. And I'm the President of the United States. The room erupted in laughter as James stood there, his face burning with humiliation. The massive white Dogo Argentino at his side remained perfectly still, unfazed by the mockery. Then came the sound. A glass shattered somewhere in the back of the room. In an instant, before anyone could blink, the dog transformed. His muscles tensed, eyes locked onto the source of the sound, and with military precision, he positioned himself between James and the perceived threat. The laughter died instantly. What happened next left everyone in that room questioning everything they thought they knew about loyalty, service, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his companion. Before we continue, if you enjoy incredible stories about extraordinary animals and the veterans who love them, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. 3 years earlier, James Mitchell had been a different man. As a Marine Corps Special Operations Command operator, he'd seen his share of combat across 3 deployments. His unit specialized in high-risk reconnaissance missions, gathering intelligence deep behind enemy lines. James had been good at his job, methodical, patient, and relentlessly focused. Those same qualities made him exceptional at training military working dogs. At Forward Operating Base Leatherneck in Afghanistan's Helmand province, James had been paired with a unique asset, a specially trained Dogo Argentino named Maximus. Unlike the typical German Shepherds or Belgian Malinois used by most military units, Maximus had been part of an experimental program. The breed's natural protective instincts, physical power, and high pain tolerance made them excellent candidates for specialized operations in certain environments. The brass wanted to see if Dogos could outperform traditional military dogs in specific scenarios. James narrated, his voice carrying the weight of those distant memories. Max was exceptional at close protection work and had an uncanny ability to detect explosives even in the most challenging environmental conditions. Their bond had formed quickly, forged in the crucible of combat operations where trust meant survival. For 18 months, they worked as a seamless unit. Maximus had saved James and his team members on multiple occasions, most notably during an ambush outside a small village near the Pakistani border. We were pinned down, taking heavy fire from multiple positions, James recalled, the images still vivid in his mind. Max detected a flanking maneuver before any of us had a clue. He alerted, then neutralized the threat. 7 of us came home because of what he did that day, but their partnership was tragically interrupted during their final mission together. Their unit had been tasked with clearing a compound suspected of housing high-value targets. As they approached the main building, Maximus had given his alert signal. Explosive materials were present. We should have pulled back immediately and called an EOD, James said, his voice hollow with regret. But intelligence indicated the targets were preparing to move. We made the call to proceed with extreme caution. What happened next changed everything. As they entered the main courtyard, the world erupted around them. The blast threw James 20 feet, slamming him against a stone wall. In the chaotic moments that followed, through the ringing in his ears and the smoke burning his eyes, his only thought was of Maximus. James found his partner partially buried in debris, gravely injured but still conscious. Despite his own injuries, James had carried the 90-pound dog over his shoulder for more than 2 miles to the extraction point. Both of them suffered significant trauma, James with a traumatic brain injury, shrapnel wounds, and a shattered femur. Maximus with injuries to his right side, particularly his front leg and internal bleeding. They were evacuated together, beginning a long journey of recovery that would test them both to their limits. The military wanted to euthanize him, James said, his voice hardening at the memory. They said his injuries were too severe, that he'd never work again. I couldn't accept that. Not after everything he'd done, everything we've been through. James fought the system with the same determination that had carried him through combat. He navigated bureaucratic obstacles, called in favors from senior officers who owed their lives to Maximus, and eventually secured permission to adopt him once both were medically discharged. Their recovery was grueling. James underwent multiple surgeries to repair his leg, while battling the invisible wounds of PTSD and traumatic brain injury. Maximus needed specialized veterinary care, including reconstructive surgery on his front leg and extensive rehabilitation. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, James admitted. The pain, the memories, the nightmares, they were overwhelming. But Max would always find a way to reach me, even when he could barely walk himself. He'd drag himself across the room, put his head on my chest, and just stay there until I found the strength to face another day. They healed together, step by painful step. James learned to walk again alongside his dog. Their physical therapy sessions became joint efforts, each drawing strength from the other's determination. As Maximus regained his mobility, albeit with a permanent limp in his right front leg, James found his own path forward. Yet returning to civilian life presented challenges neither had anticipated. James struggled with the transition, finding it difficult to relate to people who hadn't experienced what he had. Loud noises, crowds, and confined spaces triggered anxiety attacks for both man and dog. They retreated from society, finding solace only in each other's company. We were broken, both of us, James reflected. I couldn't hold down a job, couldn't maintain relationships. We were just surviving, not living. The turning point came unexpectedly, at the local VA hospital where James received treatment. During one particularly difficult appointment, Maximus had sensed James's escalating anxiety and performed a pressure therapy technique he'd never been formally trained to do, lying across James's lap, applying his weight in a way that immediately reduced James's stress response. A doctor witnessed the interaction and was amazed by the dog's intuitive response. She connected James with a program that trained service dogs for veterans with PTSD. Though Maximus wasn't a traditional service dog candidate due to his age and injuries, his natural abilities and bond with James made them ideal candidates for the program. They didn't train Max so much as they trained me to work with what Max already knew how to do, James explained. They helped us formalize and refine his responses. It gave us both purpose again. Through the program, James discovered a new mission. He began volunteering, then working part-time helping other veterans train their service dogs. As his confidence returned, he enrolled in courses on animal behavior and psychology. Maximus became a regular fixture in the classroom, his calm demeanor and obvious intelligence challenging preconceptions about what service animals could be. People would look at him and see this big, intimidating dog with scars and a limp, James said with a hint of pride. They didn't see what I saw, a hero who had saved countless lives and was still serving in his own way. 2 years after their medical discharge, James was offered a position with a prestigious service dog training organization. The job would allow him to work directly with veterans like himself, pairing them with dogs that could help them reclaim their lives. It was everything he had been working toward, a chance to make a real difference. There was just one problem. The organization's director, Patricia Winters, had reservations about Maximus. She had never worked with a Dogo Argentino before, James explained. Her experience was primarily with retrievers and shepherds. She was concerned about having such a powerful breed around vulnerable clients, especially one with a combat background. Patricia insisted on meeting both James and Maximus before finalizing the job offer. She arranged a gathering at the organization's training facility, inviting several board members and current trainers to evaluate them. James understood the caution but felt confident in his partner's abilities and temperament. What he hadn't anticipated was the skepticism they would face. The meeting began cordially enough. James spoke about his military experience and his journey with Maximus, outlining their specialized training and the techniques they had developed together. But as he described Maximus's military background and abilities, he noticed the expressions changing around the room. Exchanged glances, barely concealed smirks. "You're telling me this dog was in the military? Dear right. And I'm the President of the United States." The comment came from Richard Harmon, a board member with considerable influence. "I've been around military working dogs my whole career. They don't use white dogs. They're too visible in combat zones. And they certainly don't use this breed." The room erupted in laughter as James stood there, his face burning with humiliation. The massive white Dogo Argentino at his side remained perfectly still, unfazed by the mockery. Then came the sound. A glass shattered somewhere in the back of the room. In an instant, before anyone could blink, the dog transformed. His muscles tensed, eyes locked onto the source of the sound, and with military precision, he positioned himself between James and the perceived threat. The laughter died instantly. What happened next demonstrated everything words had failed to convey. Without a single verbal command, James placed his hand on Maximus's shoulder, a tactile signal they had developed during combat operations when silence was critical. The dog immediately relaxed his posture but remained vigilant. "Clear," James said quietly, and Maximus returned to his previous calm state, though his eyes remained focused on the room's occupants with newfound intensity. The silence was profound. Patricia was the first to recover. "I've never seen a response like that," she admitted, her professional skepticism giving way to genuine interest. "The speed, the precision, and the control you maintained without raising your voice." Richard Harmon's demeanor had changed completely. "That positioning," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "That's exactly how specialized units are trained to respond to unexpected threats. Perfect body placement for maximum protection of the handler." James knelt beside Maximus, checking him over as he always did after a stress response. "He still believes he's on duty," he explained. "Even with his injuries, even years after our discharge, he's never stopped being a soldier." The mood in the room shifted dramatically. The demonstration of Maximus's abilities had opened the door, but what truly changed minds was the story James shared next, the full account of their final mission, their injuries, and their journey of mutual healing. "There were times during my recovery when I had no fight left in me," James admitted, his voice steady despite the painful memories. "Max would lie beside my hospital bed, still recovering from his own surgeries, and he'd put his head on my hand. Just a reminder, I'm still here, we're still fighting, together." By the end of the meeting, there were no more doubts. Patricia offered James the position on the spot, with an additional proposal. She wanted Maximus to become part of their program as a demonstration dog, helping to train both handlers and service dogs. "What you two have is exceptional," she told them. "It shouldn't be hidden away. It should be shared, taught to others." In the years that followed, James and Maximus transformed the organization's approach to service dog training. Their methods, developed in combat and refined through their own healing process, proved remarkably effective for veterans with severe PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. Maximus became something of a celebrity in service dog circles. The dog that many had initially dismissed became a pioneer, opening doors for other non-traditional breeds to be considered for service work. More importantly, he helped change how people viewed veterans with invisible wounds. When people see a service dog, they often assume they know what disability the handler has, James explained during one of their many public education sessions. "With Max, his scars tell part of our story. They make the invisible visible in a way that helps people understand that not all wounds can be seen." Their influence extended beyond service dog training. James began consulting with military and law enforcement agencies, helping to improve working dog programs based on the lessons he and Maximus had learned together. Their experiences informed new protocols for handler-canine relationships and post-service transitions. 5 years after that glass shattered in the meeting room, James and Maximus stood before a very different audience, the United States Congress. They had been invited to testify in support of the Canine Veterans Service Act, legislation designed to improve adoption procedures for retired military working dogs and provide veterinary benefits for those with service-related injuries. As James prepared to speak, he felt Maximus shift slightly against his leg, a subtle pressure that had become their private communication, a reminder of presence, of partnership. "What I'm about to share with you isn't just my story," James began, his voice strong and clear in the hushed chamber. "It's our story. A story about 2 soldiers who found their way home together." The legislation passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. The image of Maximus sitting proudly beside James, both bearing the visible marks of their service, became a powerful symbol of the unbreakable bond between handlers and their working dogs. Today, The program James and Maximus helped build has paired hundreds of veterans with service dogs specifically trained to address their unique needs. Their methods have been adopted by organizations across the country, creating a lasting legacy that extends far beyond their own journey. Maximus, now in the twilight of his life, still accompanies James everywhere. The once powerful body has slowed, the white face now grayed, but the intelligence in those eyes remains undimmed. He still responds to threats with the same vigilance, still places himself between James and the world when needed. People sometimes ask me if I saved him or if he saved me. James reflects, his hand resting gently on his partner's head. The truth is, we saved each other, and in doing so, we found a way to help save others. The laughter that once filled that meeting room has long since faded. In its place is respect, admiration, and a deeper understanding of what it means to serve, not just during wartime, but every day thereafter. For James and Maximus, the mission continues. Different battlefield, same unwavering commitment. Two soldiers who learned that the greatest act of courage sometimes isn't what you do in combat, but how you find your way home, and how you help others find theirs. As for those who once doubted, they need only look at the hundreds of veterans whose lives have been transformed, who found their way back from the darkness because two wounded warriors refused to surrender to their injuries, refused to be defined by their limitations, and instead found purpose in their shared pain. Everyone laughed when James said his Dogo Argentino was a soldier, until Maximus walked into the room and showed them what true service looks like. Some lessons can't be taught with words alone. Some truths can only be demonstrated through actions. And some bonds, like the one between a handler and his dog, transcend explanation. They must be witnessed to be believed.